and what I did, I took the bag out that I have. These are all the spare grass gear and other gear, some spare gear we had for the Spitfire, some for the Seafire, some that were chewed up, some that were well detailed, and I'm looking at all the possibilities of landing gear here as the next step in working on the Spitfire. The only problem is, on this model, I shortened this amount, and I shortened this a small amount, so I'm going to need to bend new wires. Now, normally I would bend these wires and it would be no big deal. I have a wire bender, but guess what? As fate would have it, the wire bender is down in South Jersey in Jimmy's basement, so I'm going to have to bend these wires with a vise to get them right. And also, one of the considerations is the landing gear on this wing is further back than it is on the D-tube wing, so I'm trying to take into account, and I was just trying to interpolate, given the fact we have all these extra sets of landing gear, even though this is not going to be a real good way to do it, just to get some idea. Now I can almost guess that these are going to be too long, but so I can bend up a set of wires pretty much with the idea in mind that this leg needs to be a little longer than normal. So I'll make one up maybe a quarter of an inch longer than normal, make up a set of wires, and again, you need to do this in this case by eye almost, and with a vise, without my pro bender. Anyway, get the wires made up, get the plane to sit on its feet correctly before I go into deciding how I want to make the gear doors. Now, because of the extreme amount of mail, coming back from England, I just wound up with a ton of mail. I thought I was going to get a start on these today. What I did, I just basically got the wires bent. And I'm going to need to bend a long set for grass so it comes further forward, a short set for flying over tar. But I wanted to get at least one set done this week. The key thing here is that I want to have a nice fit in here. I don't want a sloppy fit. And that I want the wire to go down into the little receptacle, but certainly not come out the other side of the wings. I've been real cautious about doing that. The other thing is the way that I mount the gear, and these are mounted right on that carbon fiber spar. It's the length of this leg that makes the gear durable. If you make these the old-fashioned way with these little stubs, you are going to lose the gear. No question about it. When they're long like this, and you can even go back to the tape of Tsunami after the crash, I took the gear that wasn't broken and just worked until the wire failed in service. Well, this I hope is going to be a bulletproof setup, but the problem is we've just been overburdened with mail from this vacation, I guess we call it, while we were in England. So I'm just going to concentrate today on getting the two wires bent, come back tomorrow, and try to decide on what the leg length should be, the wheel size, do all of those calculations tomorrow. If I can get the wires bent today and get to the mailbox, that'll take care of one day. Well, we still have a few minutes left here today. I wanted to get the wires as even as possible. And obviously they need to rake forward, and I need to copy that angle and add a little angle from the original one. And this is a variable thing. The wheels will always be further forward if you're flying grass. In fact, in this case, we'll probably make two sets, grass gear and a set of gear for going on tar. But we want to start with one set, and then what I want to do, the last thing is lay a ruler right across the both of them to get the alignment right in alignment with perfect alignment with the rough spot where we're going to have the lead-outs. And they can be off a quarter of an inch or something, but I want the axles to be in alignment. And the easiest way is just take a ruler this way and a ruler this way, and that gives you a real good starting point for getting your wires bent. And you want the wires bent and tracking perfectly before you go and make any kind of gear door assemblies. I have the rake, and again, this is a lucky guess, and probably wrong the first time, but one of the things I know I want to do is I want to get the wires in tune this way, and they're both out, and also in tune this way, so I don't have any crazy angles before I go and make up. See, once you make the little spats, the little doors, then this gets to be really a problem. I'd like to get all the bending done ahead of time if I can. The trouble is it usually takes about 20 bends to get this right, and I've only done about 15 of them so far. I've got that one set now. I thought I had it set. Famous last words. And this one I need to take back. Just put a little more of a turn in it. This just takes time. You just never get this in one shot. What's handy is when you get to the final little baby amounts you have to tweak. A vice grip plier seems to work the best, as opposed to putting it in a vice. Of course, if I had my wire bender, Jimmy, by the way, Jimmy's making up a production run of horns, so he basically took the bender. Okay, we are as close as we're going to be for this phase. Now, what happens, because I don't know ultimately if this is going to be exactly what I want, I need to make one setup, a complete setup, put the plane up on its feet and see the prop clearance. Because I don't know where ultimately I'm going to balance the plane either. It could be that I'm going to have to, I'll always make the first set and see if I want to make the second set a little longer or a little shorter. If the first set is too long, in which case I can make them the grass gear, bend them forward, and then make a short set. But I have a lot of choices this way. What we have is aluminum screws, and if you can't find these locally, Micro Fasteners has them, but you have to buy 100, I think, in a box. If you only need a few, you can get them from me. Aluminum screws to hold them down, and before you make any of the final bends on the wire, you want to have them bolted in place, because sometimes that'll just spring it one way or the other. Do all the final checks, and that'll be the end of what we're going to do tonight. Tomorrow we'll start making up the gear doors. Many times that I've done this, I've tried to rush the job and not bother to bolt in the gear doors. Well, you pay later on. The aluminum screws, by the way, are a nice little weight saving. Another thing you can do with the aluminum screws is not leave them any longer than they need to be. They need to catch the length of the blind nut, but don't leave them, put 1-inch long screws in, and you kind of defeat the purpose of having the aluminum screws for the setup. Anyway, once these are tightened, we'll go back with the ruler in the front to back dimension. Make sure we have the wires exactly lined up the way we want it to. When we pick this up tomorrow, let's hope we can catch up on some of our mail. I really would like to finish this up this week if possible. Joe's already ready to fly his plane. Both of these Spitfires have been 2 years in the making. The sight down this way to see that the angle is the same. Now once we put it up on its feet, the next thing is, and I'll do this tomorrow, is we adjust that angle to get the prop clearance we want and the balance point. And if it's wrong, I need to either make these longer or shorter. But for tonight, this is all I'm going to be able to do. Getting the wires bent, everybody thinks that's a 5-minute job. Believe me, that's a big part of the job, but having it right, now we can go ahead and make up whatever detailing and gear legs we want to do tomorrow, and I'll think about how I want to do that tonight. You want to always make sure you get this wire coming out right in the middle of the block, otherwise it chews this all up and it looks terrible after you take a few landings. So what I did, I just made a rough pattern of this set of wires. Here's the reason. What I'm going to try to do today, a beautiful another rainy day, what I'm going to try to do is get the engine installed in the plane. I can get any engine, it doesn't matter. Just to get a rough balance point. The two things I'd like to try to do today, I'd like to see how this set of gear is going to wind up so that I know if I need to make a shorter set or a longer set. I want to wind up with 2 sets, obviously, as the ultimate, one for grass, one for tar. The other thing I want to do is I want to get a rough balance point. I want to go over to the rack later on today while the epoxy is drying and carefully balance both of these planes and see just about exactly where they're balancing, because we're pretty much ready to go do a trim on this. We're pretty much ready to do a bench trimming, and we're coming down the home stretch here sooner or later. Looking down at the wire legs, they look about right, but the only way to really tell if you're close is get most of the hardware in the plane, simulate the weight in the nose, and then see how the plane is going to teeter-totter on that, and that'll usually give you a good starting point for setting up the gear for the first flight. Now, before I even do any preliminary balancing, it looks like we're real close. I just, how you grab it by the high point of the wing and see, well, it looks like that's going to be okay. Now, obviously, one of the things that's really critical is to answer the phone. All right, give me a break. Now, this is the way I establish where I want what's going to be my gear for flying over tar to be. Is I want this nose to stay down. As soon as I just pick it up just the least little bit, I don't want it to fall now. It's basically, that's going to be my place for starting with where I want these gear to be for flying over tar. So to fly over grass, obviously I'd move these forward just a little bit. I want to make sure I still have the prop clearance I wanted. Plenty of prop clearance. So what I can do with the next set, I can make a set either a little bit shorter, and again, and use these for the long gear, just bend them forward. What I'll do is I'll flip the model over, bend each one forward just a little bit, until I have a position. I'll do this off camera because it's just going to be time to do a position where when I let go of the nose, the tail falls right down. And at that point, I know, basically from that point on, that's going to be the place where I want to put the grass gear. Where no matter what happens, I let go of the nose, the tail falls down, that'll be a good place to have the grass gear, a good starting point. But I want to work this and fine tune it up. So let me get the mat out and bend these gear forward just a little bit. Kind of happy where that cowling deal worked out, and we'll see if we need any additional openings or coolings, or you never really know that until you fly the plane. Anyway, I'm looking at the position. Now the way I bend these is I take this one off first and bend this one forward maybe 1/4 inch. Then I can sight down the wires. Notice I'm looking right at the wires and see that they're parallel. As soon as I get this one as far forward as I anticipate it may have to go, then I take the other one and bend it so that they're both equal. Rather than trying to bend them both at the same time, it's always better to bend one at a time. I've found that to be a much better choice. Depends what I can do. If I wanted to do this over and over again, what I do is make a little template here, but I don't need to. I just need to pull this forward just a little bit at a time, maybe 1/8 or 1/4 inch, and eventually I'll get to the point where as soon as I let the nose down, I know that tail will drop right down. And that's just my starting point, but that'll get me in the ballpark. Now you can look down and see the two wires. See, I've got the outer one bent forward, probably a little more than I have to. Now it's just a question of bending the other one forward, getting them in perfect alignment, putting the hatches back on, and let's see where that balances. And this is the part where it may have to go back and forth 8, 10, 15 times. I don't know. But I know one thing for sure. Once I get this right, at the position it's at right now, where the nose stays down, that's fine for tar. But on a first flight, you'd really want to even have the gear a little bit forward for that, so there's no tendency at all for the tail to pick up. Or if we do decide to fly over grass the first time, you sure don't want to, when you have that teeter-totter where the nose stays down and you fly over grass, almost guaranteed you run the risk of, the gear at that point are almost straight down, and you run the risk of knocking them out on every flight. That's really not a good thing to, if in doubt, a little further forward is always better until you actually get to the gnats or someplace where you can roll and hold the tail reel up. The only purpose of this fine-tuning is to be able to hold that tail reel up to the last minute and then put it down right in front of the judges if that's what you're trying to do with a semi-scale plane. Now notice we have them both bent forward. Both of those wires are almost identical. And that's the key thing. Now the next step here is to put the little doors back in and see if we have that rocking action that we want. When we get that just right, and by going a little bit further forward each time, we'll find a spot at which it just balances in. And things like the pipe and putting different spinners on, it's all need to be fine-tuned later. But right now we need to know that we're close. We need that reel somewhere in a position where it'll just let the tail fall down the minute I let the nose go. And once we have that position, that's a good starting point. Now we can mold up the gear legs. Now once I'm real happy, and boy, it takes a lot of little tweaking to get this just right. I've been going back and forth, I'm guessing about 20 times here. Anyway, once I know that I have that right, I want to put the little gear doors back for what I hope will be the final time, but you never really do know that. And I probably can trim a little bit off of these aluminum screws eventually. Sure, it'd be nice if I didn't lose the wrench. Sure, here it is. Who says he lost the wrench? Anyway, seems like this part of it takes an awful lot of time. And the truth is, it does. But if you have the gear too far back, it's going to be prone to nose over and break a prop on takeoff. Even when the gear are in the right position, it's a problem, but that can happen. And if in doubt, always better to have the wheels a little bit too far forward than too far back, just like it's better to have the plane a little bit nose heavy rather than tail heavy for a first flight. And we'll go through these planes. In fact, I'm going to try to do it today while the gear are being laid up and weigh them all out and see where they balance and make myself a little chart up. I've been thinking that might be a good idea. Might be good information, because one thing I don't have in my notes is where they went. I had all of the numbers where they started, but obviously that's changed a lot over the years. Still have more than enough prop clearance on a 12-inch prop. That'll be fine. But here's the key thing again. I've been sneaking up on this. I want that as far. And this is just a place to start here. We got it now. I don't want it to go whack in there, but right there, that's a good position to start and make up the final gear legs. The absolute last thing, before I actually go to putting the legs on, because these have been bent several times. I'm ashamed to tell you, they've been bent about 50 times. And I want to make sure at this point in time that I haven't, as you move these forward, this angle seems to change just a little bit, probably because it's been squeezed. In fact, see, this one is out. This one here has to go back just a little bit. But anyway, this is the time to do it, because once you have the gear legs on, then every time you move them, you tend to crack them, so it's a problem. Now we have an advantage with this plane because the blocks are in, the gear blocks are in a straight line. Most of the time, because of the way the wings are built with the rake, the blocks are not in straight. And every time you move this, you change all the angles. It's like doing a wheel alignment. This is just the slightest bit, boy, I'll tell you. I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. Just the slightest bit off, and we'll have it. I said that about 1,000 times already. I think we're going on the 2000th bend here. And every time I do this, I think we're going to live with that. Okay, now with the wires totally bent, and that really was labor intensive, more than even you can imagine from the video. What happened is, and we have this on video for somebody that's never, these things get kind of redundant. When I made this mold, I know this was in the early days of molding, and I didn't realize that it would have been a lot better to do it that way, and the air bubbles would have had a tendency to come up to the top. So what happens now is the air bubbles have a tendency, obviously here it's a real problem, they're all right on the part. But still, as opposed to, because we're under such a time constraint, our trip to England really ate up a lot of shop time. One of the things that now we're able to do is make up a prototype set of gear. Now making these legs up and all the detailing and sanding and things that were for a couple of days. This is a lot of work. So with this mold, now what this allows me to do, and when we did this originally, we were using polyester resin with no filler. Well, now we're not going to do that, obviously. What we're going to do is we're going to do this with carbon fiber. I need to cut up here a little bit, make a little change. This holds the wire at 90 degrees, and obviously I need to account for that. I need to put a little notch in here, and I'll be able to mold up. I almost hit the number just right on the money here. I should be able to mold up, once I finalize this, with the exception of sanding. Now I'm going to have to do some sanding, but that as opposed to making these legs from scratch, and what is nothing, and I'm going to do epoxy now, and load it as much as I can with carbon fiber. Get as much carbon fiber in this so that these gear legs will be as stiff as can be. Now, before I do that, I can do two things. I shortened the screws to the minimum length that go, and they're aluminum screws, they're not steel screws, so they weigh less than half of the weight. And all these little things like the aluminum screws, believe me, when we weigh the final model, you'll see it really adds up. It'll make a difference in the final product. Now this wire, just looking at it, some of the things I can do, I can lighten this arm some. I need to leave the end as wide as possible so it gets a nice bite into that block that's up here. But in here, I don't need 1/8 of an inch of wire. I can get rid of that. I can also, because this is going to be carbon fiber reinforced, I can take some of this material away and I can roughen this leg up. And I'll do that on a grindstone or with a Dremel tool. I want to leave this full strength and beyond the bend maybe 1/8 of an inch. I sure wouldn't want to lighten up that torsion arm. That would be the one thing I wouldn't want to fool with. But up here I can take some material away, and down here I certainly can take some away. It should be no problem at all to get rid of some of that material without weakening it at all. Knowing that when we put it in the carbon fiber mold, that's going to hopefully be much stronger, even than if it was just solid wire. Separate video we have the making of these parts, and the only thing I would suggest is if anybody's going to replicate that, turn these upside down so the air bubbles go the other way. But that was part of our learning curve, and obviously the message there is we weren't born knowing any of this. This all stuff has to be invented as you go along. But these legs have worked well over the years.
Grind only to the point where you see the wire starting to discolor, because otherwise you detemper the wire. So I'll just let this cool before I go on to the next grinding motion. You don't want to grind it till the wire turns red and blue, and what you're going to ultimately do is detemper the wire. Any material around any of the corners, but these flats, that I think is about the limit we can take material off of there, and we're ready to make the mold up. Also, where the epoxy is going to go, I want to just roughen this up just the slightest little bit with the end of a parting wheel. So just let the epoxy get a better grip and act as a torsion agent. Add some torsional strength without reducing it, without making a part any heavier at all.
Now with these edges all roughed up, the wires lightened, they're ready to start fitting in, and I need to obviously make a little change because of the angle we have here is just a little bit different. Might help if I use the right mold. Okay, so that's a relatively tight fit. Now what I need to do is just take a little bit of material off up here. And we'll hold it right in there, and then my test is to make sure this is a 90 degree. Otherwise this would wind up, this maintains that you have 90 degrees right against the leg. Alright, so we're ready to go here. Now what I need to do is just get this up off the table with a little block of balsa. Let's see if I can get this even. Just want it up off the table just a little bit so that that leg can lay down while I'm doing the layup.
Have you ever felt it?
What I'm mixing up a little batch of 5-minute epoxy because I want to seal. This mold has been used over and over again, and I want to seal it. I've made a lot of these gear legs for customers, and it's really getting worn out. But I want to make a thick paste. I want to put a little bit of white dye in. That'll help in terms of getting the the finished part, if we buff through in a little spot or run through, you won't wind up with this giant eyesore of a color coming through. And all this is going to do is, as soon as this starts to go to cheese, I'm going to use this to seal in the mold. Seal where the wire goes through on both ends. And this is just ordinary 5-minute epoxy. And what I need to do is get, and you can see right up here is where it's going to need to be sealed. This will all get carved off later. This just makes a little dam of sorts. So that when we fill a mold with the resin, and we'll use a high-strength resin, that'll tend to seal it off. And then I can just take this off with a knife. Again, it's RTV silicone rubber, so in essence it should, well, we're going to sand it anyway, so there's no point worrying about release agents right now. I want to get that wire to set down, and I want to check the 90 degree. And that hopefully will seal that up. Okay, we're using the real high-strength resin here. We'll start real slow, get some white dye in this, and we'll be ready to do the layup. You want to start as slowly as possible so you don't get any extra air bubbles. We're going to have enough sanding to do on this without having extra air bubbles. Just the slightest little bit of white dye in here. Keep this from, I'm hoping, if I get paint chips in there, it'll just give me a little advantage that when I sand through, I'm not going to wind up hitting this maroon color of epoxy. But probably the carbon will stick through, so maybe this will all be wasted effort, who knows. You decide you're going to add more dye to this, don't take the Q-tip out of here that has epoxy on it and put it in the dye. It'll contaminate the dye. Just put the dye right in and then throw that Q-tip away. Well, we're not going to be able to get this as white as I'd like, but this would be better than nothing, that's for sure. Getting anxious to try to weigh this plane, see how we fit in the overall weight. I know a lot of people, they're thinking, well, how much lighter can it be? It's an I-beamer or whatever, or because it has Brodak dope, or because it has a different power package that's a little bit heavier. Well, we're not going to know until we get all three of these on a scale at the same time on the same day. Actually, we need to trim this one out and get the final tip rate and everything, but it'll be a very interesting thing at some time in the near future to do that. I'm going to use my little system here that I have. You can see I have a heat lamp. Same thing you have in McDonald's to heat the French fries or keep them warm. What I want to do is I want to heat the resin just a little bit. I want to let the mold warm up just a little bit. And you can feel a point at which you can feel heat, and that's the height. You just lower or raise the lamp until you get the heat that you want. Now, the object of this is to get as much tow in here as possible, so that in the end we have half tow and half resin. And that's relatively difficult to do. It requires a lot of packing and squeezing and squeegeeing to get just right, but I think we got a good chance of getting it. Now, I've really tried, and I don't think I've been as successful as I think of this, to get as much carbon packed in there. I've been packing it in with every way I could, toothpicks and stuff. Try to get this as highly carbonated. Anyway, and I'm going to put a little block of wood on top of this and try to squeeze out any extra resin I can. And since I know, see, it's not important now because I know I'm going to have to finish this. I'm going to have to hand sand it because the original mold does not have a quality finish. So if I make another set of gear, maybe what I'll do is I'll make another set out of wood and then use those to make the impressions. But actually right now we just don't have the time for that, and that certainly will be one of our future here comes the rest of the resin, one of our future projects. Try to get as much of that resin squeezed out as I can. This also helps get out any air bubbles. And again, the problem is we know we're going to have to do some hand finishing on this, so there's no point really making a production out of it. Get on with other projects here. I always do this and then take an impression. Of course, I got the Teflon sheeting in there. Get that up over the corner of the mold. Just a lot of hand fooling. You know, what's happened to this mold is every time I've used it, it's gotten a little more pitted than the time before. And when I originally made this mold, using polyester resin with no carbon, it's a totally different thing than that. You just fill a mold and walk away. Well, you can't do that, and I didn't have the Teflon film technology at that time either. Just try to get this as flat as I can. It'll just save me some sanding. Doesn't really matter. I don't worry about it. It's going on Teflon. And as Midgley always reminds me, nothing sticks to Teflon. I will look at that pair tomorrow and see what we have, see what the final result is going to be. Okay, one of the things that I really want to establish here while the gear are out curing, and they'll basically sit over there and cook, I want to take out all my old landing gear, and I want to get a rough weight with 2 1/4 inch reels and with 2 inch. Those are the two sizes that we use most of all. I just want to get a ballpark feeling, because if these composite gear aren't a lot lighter, then maybe we'll make up the new mold. Okay, this is 36 grams each. Now I also have the wooden legs. I can check the wooden legs. You know, a lot of times you think something is real heavy and it really isn't. Let's just see how much lighter this is. This is 32. So now, a lot of times you're just playing here for a couple of grams and it's hardly worth it. Now, where's the 2 inch reel? Let's see what this weighs with a 2 inch reel. Give us some idea how much we're saving here. We can get each leg down to, look, see, here we go. 31. So now I want to have, to add to my notebook, I want to have the new gear, new width 2 1/4, and width 2 inch. Now usually we'd use 2 inch on tar, 2 1/4 on grass, and then we'll have those numbers. That's a significant thing we know. So now we are basically, we're talking about a little over 1 ounce each, because what I want to do is I want to get a weight on the airplane here, a final, not an all-up weight, but just a rough idea of if this airplane is on the heavy side or the light side, or if it's on the nose heavy side or the tail heavy side. Now if it's on the nose heavy side, I need to know where the other two planes balance. Working off that, I can get an idea, if this is nose heavy, what can I do to the front of the plane to lighten it up? The one choice we have is we made up various compositions using different resins. These look all exactly the same. I've got one extra one to test. See, this one's a little bit heavier. A grain heavier.
Black cats creep across my path until I'm almost mad.
And this is the lightest one at 6.5 grams, the back plate. So now I know if I run into a nose heavy situation, the first thing I can do is put on the light back plate as one of the choices. Now before I do anything, I want to get an idea what the spinner weighs, what the back plate weighs. I want to make notes of all the component parts. So when I decide I need to get weight out of the nose, I have accurate weights on everything. And I have a couple other spinners to try. Give me a variety of shapes. Some of them are more pointy. Just as an example, the back plate that comes with the spinner, it's an Aero Product spinner. by the way, I'm making these for Randy to sell too. Let's see what this back plate weighs. This is the standard aluminum back plate, is 23 grams. So I'll write that down. Okay, now by replacing that with one of the carbon back plates, let's see what the carbon weighs. This should be about 7. So what you can see right away is, when we need to get nose weight out, right there is a ½ ounce, right there. No matter how you cut it, that's a ½ ounce of weight. And obviously whether you switch to a totally different spinner, the cones, now I was just on a phone with Randy this morning, weighing the cones and tips. Let's get an idea. I think he said these were 10. Because we may be making they're really 14 with the bolt and everything. 14. Let's take one of our carbon ones. Not a whole lot lighter, but it's a much bigger shape. But you get the picture now. Now we have, what we're trying to do is get all our components in order, have them all set up with little notes, a little notepad of what each one is. So when we go to bench trim this plane, and I may not get to do that today, either today or tomorrow, I want to make a very detailed list of where the plane balances, what it weighs, and what my component choices are to either lighten the nose, or for instance, here's the whole point. If the plane needs nose weight, what do you need this for? I mean, you may as well just forget about this and use the stock parts, which are less expensive. Well, it makes sense, you know. These are just common sense things. But I really, as a last choice, and I hope I don't have to resort to it, is like things like brass tail wheels and solder on a tail wheel. What I'd like to do is get weight off of the heavy side, whichever side this trims out to be. You can change the whole look of the plane just by changing the spinner. In other words, there's one of our original Spitfire spinners, a two-bladed spinner, even with the back plate super light. But you can change the whole look of the plane, as an example, just by, and this is an old Vico, and we have Randy's spinner. We have a lot of choices here, but I want to catalog the weight, and these I made years ago. And by the way, I am not making any more of these. These are so late. These are ones for the 5-bladed prop. A lot of choices. We have a lot of choices with weight. Now I'll catalog this all up off camera. That would be the most sensible thing to do. But the last, I didn't even see you find things in my spinner box you don't even know you had. I know what this is. This is the aluminum 5-blade we made. Anyway, here's the whole point, is if you have choices, when you get to the field to trim the plane, it's so nice and easy. When you have no choices, basically you don't have any, you're just locked in and you start wrapping solder all over the place. I would like to have a lot of this done right here in the shop before we ever get to the flying field. Oh boy, President Spinner calling. Now I'm being real accurate here. With an aluminum back plate, an aero spinner is 38 grams. With a carbon back plate, it's, again, I want to know the accurate numbers here. I don't want to just, people just pick something and go, oh, that doesn't weigh anything. Baloney. 22 with a carbon. So it's actually a ½ ounce lighter. You save a ½ ounce with the carbon. That's a good ballpark number. Anyway, what I want to do is I had this one fit. I love the way this looks. The shape really blends in with the rest of the plane, just about the way I want it to. Only problem is I only have one of them. So, but let's see. Now, this is with the back plate. So we're comparing apples to apples. This might be heavier. Okay, it's pretty much, it's 22. See, so these are the things, now I know, just as an example, this spinner and this one are kind of interchangeable. Kind of nice to be able to interchange them like that. But I'm going to go right down my whole list here. I have a whole bunch of others to piddle with. Let's just, as an example, see what a Vico weighs, since we just happen to have one. Now, just not super crazy about the Vico shape on there.
Gotta make it's like getting married. You gotta make a commitment. It's difficult. Okay, the Vico is lighter by... Got a back plate there? No back plate. No, it's not lighter. Wrong. So what this is telling you, just get a... These are the things, it's real easy to just pick something up and say, oh, that doesn't weigh anything. You get done with the model and it's 70 ounces. 31. So, here's what we've deduced, that the heaviest of the spinners that we now have is a Vico spinner. It's the heaviest. So, Randy's with a carbon backplate is at least a tie with our carbon ones, our old fiberglass ones. So now we have two really nice choices, and we can pretty much play mix and match here however we want. And if you don't have this stuff written down and you don't weigh it, you never really know. You're just guessing.
Now, because we want to paint the spinners, I want to get all rough edges off and the razor edges so that the paint will stick better. This is wet and dry 320, that's 180. Nice and rough, put plenty of scratches in. I'll get a coat of Brodak primer on these, and a coat of the color paint, and maybe a coat of clear. It ever stops raining. You don't want to paint, if you're going to paint, you choose to paint a spinner. You don't want to paint right over the aluminum, and at the last thing you want to put some M600, degrease it. You certainly want to get every little razor edge that you can, radius down. That's an important part because that's where the paint starts peeling up from. All these little sharp edges.
Yeah, obviously one of the things I did, get a nice coat of Brodak primer on there, let that dry, I taped off the threads. Once that Brodak primer dries, and that's typically under 20 minutes, we can get ready to paint the yellow. And even though it stopped raining, it's really a gloomy day. I may not be able to shoot the clear today, but always a good idea. What do? I put a screwdriver through the spinner. That's just one easy way to hold it while you're painting it. I want to get these painted and get a couple of coats of clear on. And if it's humid like this, you may have to hold off on the clear till another day. But this will be it for today. We're going to pick this up tomorrow. Hopefully get all that stuff weighed and balanced and everything. Boy, I'll be looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to getting this guy in the air now. We're just coming down the home stretch with a few little detail parts. We'll be ready to fly. Now this morning, this ought to be fun. Peel away the Teflon film. Now I know these parts are going to have to be hand finished, so one of the things I'm not really overly concerned about is what the surface is on one side. I just want to make sure. Well, let's see if this one. I like to try to get these out without.
Living in a mess.
I'm going to have to take this piece of the mold apart.
My echo.
Right, now see, when it sticks like that, what I'm going to have to do is go around the whole edge of this with a brand new XL blade. That's what I wanted to show on the tape, because this is one of the things that's when you have a rubber mold with a wooden edge, you always have to, let me go in there and get it in fact, you have to take into account that wooden edge. Now we could have, if we wanted to, put PVA on there, but since we're not anticipating using this mold much longer, maybe a couple more pulls from this mold will be all that we're ever going to get.
What good is the moonlight?
Anything that the epoxy touches that isn't rubber, of course, it's going to stick. And the first time this happens to you, you get very distraught about it. I do anyway.
I walk with my shadow.
This is the kind of thing they don't show you on the molding videos you buy commercially. When they show you the part, it just jumps out of the mold the first time. You do it, doesn't exactly jump out. Now, even though we broke the wood part of this, it really doesn't matter. It's the rubber piece that we need.
Even till eternity.
And as crude and awful as that may look,
once we sand away the little pieces, the little imperfections here, we'll have a landing gear. It's just got the little bubbles on it. Or actually, even after that, we probably could use this over and over again, but it would just require some hand finishing. Because we've made so many parts from this, I tend to think the next time I need to do this, it might be time to make a new mold. We've certainly gotten our money's worth, and we've learned a lot from this operation.
Goodbye. I knew this was love the moment I found you.
Okay, I guess we're ready to trim this part out and get in there with some sandpaper and maybe a Dremel and get some of that material out of there. Now again, let's take a little look at some of the little problems that we've had. And again, this is all things we learned from having the air bubbles come up into the mold instead of casting it upside down. Now the first thing I did, because there's a lot of carbon, you can see I've been able to pack a lot of carbon in. I go over on a Dremel tool, Dremel saw, and saw this out, get the outline out, then try to block sand one surface flat here. And then I can work away at these little details, possibly doing a final sanding on them. Again, as crude as these look, they're an exact replica of the original Spitfire ones that we used on the original Spitfire.
Looking for yesterday.
Alright, good old cutting pad. I tried to use the saw on this. The saw was kind of inconvenient because the wire is sticking up in the way, so a good old XL cutting pad. We can trim away most of the extra. You can see there's still some up here I have to work with. But they trim right out. And imagine now if you had to make these, I had to carve them out of balsa wood. First off, the first thing that's wrong is they'd be very delicate. You go like that and that would be the end of it. The other thing is, when we fly at the circle burner field on grass, they would take such a beating that it's by the end of the week, this piece would be missing, this would be missing. And these, when they're done, they're virtually flawless. After 3 full seasons of flying on the other Spitfires, there's not one crack in them. So I tend to think these will even be stronger with the carbon and a little bit lighter, I hope. If you can pack even more carbon than that in there, it would be better, of course.
What I'm trying to do is clean this surface here up. A lot of the edges, it's a lot easier to dress them off this way. And one of the things on a Spitfire, they have this relief all around the edge. If you look at a scale photo, I want to work that relief into the whole part too. I did a rough calculation of the weight. The original parts, the wood parts, were 22 grams, so I'm going to try to get these down to at least the tie with the wood, that they aren't a lot heavier, or that they're close. But by getting in and getting all these details relieved out, I'll put the different tools on to get in there and get a nice relief on all of these edges. Make sure all the details are nice and sharp before I go ahead and put the Brodak primer on. I put some simulated lightning holes, which are semi-prototypical anyway, in there, just to see how that was going to look. These are now 20 grams each, so even adding the paint, they'll be lighter than the wood parts, and they're detailed. That's what I like more than anything else, is that I can get the details. Another nice way to get these edges, I thought I'd put this on the video, hardwood motor mount with the sticky back paper. I can get in all the edges and detailing. Now, had we made a proper mold or another mold, if we had another couple of days to work on this, remember the problem here is that we're running out of time because of our trip to England and several other things
having to murder a few tenants was one of them. Things that just unexpectedly delay the whole program. What I'm going to learn from this, though, is in next year to be much further along than I was this year. Just things beyond my control. This little sanding block, the little hard rubber guy, has come in very handy for detailing edges like this. These are little things that are hard. When you look at it, you say, ooh, how do you do that? How do you do that? I think there's a program on TV about that. Anyway, I'm going to finish sanding these out, get a coat of Brodak primer on them. Actually, miracle of miracles, it stopped raining. I'm going to see if I can get some time on George's motor. I have another 60 coming. I've already ordered another one. So we'll have 2 in our test program. And believe me, if you're considering any kind of a purchase of a new motor, consider the Jet 60. It's a honey. Okay, that's about ready for the Brodak primer. Believe it or not, after 4 days of rain, it finally looks like we're going to have a day to get some more time on our Jet 60. I expect later this week I'll have the other engine in-house and get all the running on that. And what's good is once I get a prop or a Venturi setup or something that's working on one, I'll just be able to duplicate it into the other plane. So that should be a big help. Okay, you can see there's a lot of little pinholes need to be filled in here. And this is where Brodak primer really works well. Take a look at this up close. What happens now is I'll give this 10-15 minutes to dry while I'm loading up the truck, and then I'll spray a second coat on. So this will be drying. While we're up the field flying, this can be drying. Brodak primer is really a product that the only problem I find with it, sands dry difficult. It's difficult to sand dry. So I always try to gear my stuff around that I'm going to sand it wet. I'll get 2 coats on this and then we'll get up the field. Hey, Mother's Day is coming. We got to plant some flowers. Alright, so while those gears are drying the first coat of Brodak primer, one of the things, you look up at the sky, it's already starting to get ominous, but I want to get some more runtime on this engine, so when I get home, hopefully I'll know a little more than when I left. Yeah, we have some really crappy air. At least it's almost flyable here. Air is going back and forth, though. It rained this morning. It feels a mud hole. But we do want to get some time on this, and I have Mike here to help me do some of the test piloting, so let's see what we can figure out. Well, I got all 3 blades here and 1 2-blade. I double-checked in the pitch as a 4-blade in this class, so I have 2 BY&Os now, a thin one and a thick one, both be pitched, a Bali, and a Bill Lee. So we can do some prop testing. I'll get this all ready as soon as Mike's done flying. I'll try to get some flights here today. Now, I've already taken 3 flights. One a little bit on the rich side, one a little bit on the lean side, and one right about where it should be to get an overall feel for where this prop, this is George's prop, the one we used on the 50. And it's been down-pitched and up-pitched and down-pitched and up-pitched, and the last time I pitched it, I made it just a little bit more than the gauge, but it's still, what's happening is when I get it to pull the way I want, I'm a little bit on the lean side, and we are really experiencing, this day has gotten very hot. So what I'm going to do is just switch to one of the props that has a bit more pitch. We're into the 2nd gallon of Power Master fuel on this. And one of the things is we're backing up constantly and moving around, so it's really not going to be a good day to shoot stunt pattern flights. But that's okay because I want to work with this motor a little bit. A lot of times when you basically you want to do some experimenting and the day is so nice for flying stunt patterns, you never get to fly stunt patterns. I want to put these 2 on the back burner for now. What I have with the, I never flew the Bill Lee prop. I want to give that a shot. That prop is very similar to George's prop, except it's not highly undercambered. I balanced this out. We'll put this one on next, and the problem is you need an adapter. I got to find my little adapter. I guess he made this shaft size for a PA61. I have the two BY&Os. Again, this is a great day for doing all this ballpark stuff. Basically, because we're not really at the point even that we want to start flying stunt patterns.
Okay, Bill Lee's prop. I don't have the adapter here, so I'm going to skip over that one and go right into testing BY&Os. The one Larry brought me from BSC, so I've not thinned this one out yet. Anyway, looks like we're getting some flying. If nothing else, we are getting some flying. And the general rule around this part of the country is it's always better to get some flying than no flying. So anything I can get, I'll take. Again, if the air gets a little more stable, we'll try to shoot a couple of flights. The 2.4 part of this motor is in the bank, as delivered. I'm only worried about getting props. Well, it's still better than that they predicted rain all week. This is, at least we're getting some flying in. Thank God for small miracles. Thank God we don't live in Oklahoma. You see what happened to those poor people at all. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. The bugs out there already? Yeah, I see they're on my arm already. I got some bug repel. I got to get out of there. Flying around before, and the things are flying in your nose and under your glasses and everything. They're like Polacks. They prefer Polish blood. There's plenty of it on the field right now. At least we're getting some time on this motor so far. So. And any day up here has got to be better than on the ladders, right? That's for sure. How did I know you'd say it? Ready? Yep. Now what I've been doing is taking 3 flights with each prop. A flight a little bit on the rich side, a flight a little bit on the lean side so I can see what the 2 borders are, and then try to get it needled right about in the middle. Now, all of these props have had the pitch changed, and I'm sneaking up on having a gauge. They're close, but I still need to just have on the BY&Os just a hair more. Now, I underpitched them last time. Now I need to change my gauge and go back just a hair. And I think we'll have it for the BY&Os. And we'll have 2 good choices. Just your average 13-year-old model waiting for the bell crank to wear out. I think this plane's going to outlive you and I. We're going to be buried. The 1987 Concourse winner. Still flying every day that Mike says he's at his job. Go through the props one by one. I try to put a little note on what I want to do to each prop as I run it. And what happens, otherwise when I get home, by the time I get home, sometimes I can't find my way home, I can't remember. Anyway, we still have the thinned out BY&O to spend a little time with. We're just going to run through these props. It is not a stunt pattern day, unfortunately, but it's a good day for testing props. Well, Mike's gone. We've got about a half a gallon of gallon 2 shot. Couple of gut impressions that come out right away. Number one is the motor is extremely, almost to the point of being eerie,
stable on the needle, very predictable needle. Anybody that's concerned about that, can just forget about it. Need to get me a little new washer here. This guy's chewed up. 1,000 trips on and off with the prop. Anyway, we've carefully taken all the props that are underpitched, and so when I go home I can adjust my gauge. And it's always a guessing game, and you always want to go too much, not enough, too much, not enough, too much, not enough, and get it right in the middle. And hopefully very soon we'll have that option. Now this is the undercambered BYNO, the one I have thin blades. And again, what's real interesting here is Bill Lee's prop and the one George Aldrich sells are very, very similar. It looks like they were made on the same blank, really. Except George's is highly undercambered and Bill Lee's has very, very little, if any, undercambered. So again, if I can find the adapter, I just can't find the adapter. I can run those back to back and get a feel for if I'm getting any benefit from the undercamber. And boy, you could spend all day arguing with people about undercamber and no undercamber, and there's only one real way to do it. Make two props exactly the same. Look at these geese. Holy mackerel. Many times I've taken the same prop, of course you need two of them that are identical, made one really undercambered and one no undercamber, and sometimes you can see a performance gain, sometimes you don't. And the reason I attribute that to, if you have a prop with real heavy blades, sometimes you get a big gain in undercamber in the prop. When a prop is already thin, or in some cases the props are too thin already, their undercamber seems to have very little, if any, maybe no benefit at all. But again, the only real test is have two of them. We're lucky we have two BYNOs, two of the Bill Lee types, and we're able to do that and then come to our own conclusion. And it's the kind of thing that's not going to be exactly the same for everybody. Everybody is going to have just a little bit different experience with it. Anyway, we'll run out today. I hope we can get these geese off. This field is turning into a boil. Now, as usually happens, I just came across what I thought was some pretty interesting stuff on the last 3 flights. I ran the undercambered prop. This is the undercambered BYNO for 3 flights, fast, medium, and hard. And even though they both pitch out exactly the same on the gauge, because this one has the thinned blades and undercambered, this one is significantly stronger at that pitch. And I mean an amount that, not faster in lap time, it's just stronger in overhead tension. So it seems like maybe I've made a little bit of a gain. Now the reason I think what I surmise is happening is because the blades are lighter, it's letting the motor unload in the 2-cycle, up top, overhead 8. So by lightening the blades, this is one example of where an undercambered job really helps. But now I want to move on. I want to try some of these other props. We're really using this day to good advantage. I'm surprised we're having this much really good luck. Getting a lot of good testing done today. I go through them. Of course, I'm marking each one for the changes that I need to make when I get home. The trouble with all this testing on a day like today, it's very, very labor-intensive and time-consuming, and I would assume most people don't want to be bothered with this. Well, that's great, too, because hopefully by the time we get to the Nats, or maybe even Brodex, we'll have a real good database from which to draw that if you're getting a Jet 60, or even a 50, we can either do one of two things. You can try my props, and the ones that work we can replicate for you, or hopefully eventually we're going to know enough about this that we'll be able to get 1 or 2 good choices, a 2-blade and a 3-blade, that'll work for almost everybody. It's a lot of work, a lot of work. Idea just how much I've undercambered this blade. We're through the woven material in spots, and it's really thin out at the tip. I don't know if you can see how thin I've got this. And this is one of the reasons this really lets the engine unload in the 2-cycle part of the maneuvers. So I see that there's a little bit of a gain from having this. Again, more testing. See, you can see the weave is already through there. And even this wouldn't be worth much if we weren't going to share it with everybody. The point is, we're going to share it with everybody. We'll make the props for them. If you really, in the worst of all worlds, you can probably wind up just mailing me a prop. I'll run it on my plane and get it pitched for you. This is the part of it that the more you do, the easier it gets. Now, I do it without a gauge. Most people really do need a gauge, but I just lift down. And in fact, I've got some 2 blades here. And I line up this face here with my one eye closed, and I can look out on a prop and I can see just about how much pitch it is. And it's really not that scientific. A prop just needs to have more pitch or less if it's wrong. And knowing which way to go will save you a lot of time and energy and money, obviously. This is our contribution into the GMA JET program to get a lot of this data in the bank. I know it's not possible for George to do this kind of work, or not practical. I think he's better off at the machine shop, and I'm better off out here grinding my way in this puddle of oil here and chasing the Canada geese away. Now, at last, I finally found the adapter. Here I'm telling everybody to keep such good track of inventory, and I lost the adapter. Anyway, this is Bill Lee's prop, and what's significant, this has less undercamber. So now I'm looking at the other end of this. It's a thin blade prop with less undercamber, so let's see what happens. Now, as I suspected, Bill Lee's prop has much more drive, much more thrust than the same prop undercambered. But again, I think part of that is because the blades are thin. Now, whatever the reasoning is here, and wherever we've crossed over the line, what we have is a phenomenon that I need to think more about before I make any final decision. But I've put a lot of good data in the bank. Now, George's prop with all the undercambering, what may need to happen is I may need on an undercambered prop to add pitch so that it is equal. Billy's prop doesn't have the undercambering and it drives better. But the exact opposite thing happens on the BY&O. On the BY&O, by thinning out the blades because it's a tremendous load and it's a heavy prop, by lightening the prop, it gets more drive. So we've walked into a hornet's nest, of course. And this is why you have to do all the tests. And this is only the beginning. We haven't even started. The situation is to just try each prop in duplicate, one undercambered and one not, and see how they work. Now we're getting basically toward the end of gallon 2 here. One of the things I realized in doing all this prop tests, and I haven't really been paying much attention to the tank shin, I've been paying attention to the thrust and drive and the load on the motor. But one of the things that's pretty apparent now that I've tried a whole variety of props and a whole variety of run types, one of the things that's apparent is this motor needs a different tank shinning than the 50. Now, I was real curious to see, because what I really thought was going to happen is this would be an exact bolt-in, and it just confirms my suspicion that the tank shin is different for every motor. It isn't the same. A lot of times it isn't the same even when you have 2 motors the same. But I'm going to try to record, and I hope I have enough battery left to just record one of the flights so I can listen to the motor run. Now, what I've picked up so far, and this is what you can usually pick up from a video, is the motor seems to be faster on inside maneuvers, shuts off sooner in the maneuver on outsides. In the verticals, that's what it always hurts the vertical, because then you don't get that nice lean burst up top of the hourglass and on top of the vertical 8. So rather than I hope I'll have enough battery here to just get whatever I can, get one flight for my own reference. So far, the prop fly off today, Bill Lee's prop with the no undercambering seems like the one for today's conditions. We're about 75 and very humid. But again, we're going to go check with our gauge. And these props have memory. They change from time to time, especially when you leave them out in the sun. So I feel like I've really accomplished a lot today. If I can get at least one flight on video, I'm just going to run this until the battery goes dead. Then I can go home, and while I'm working in the shop tomorrow on the Spitfire on the landing gear legs, I can play this tape over and over and over, listen to the motor, and get my gut impressions right and get the props all repitched up for the weekend. As many times as you have it wrong, the advantage of doing it over and over again, as soon as something's a little out of tune, out of pitch, out of shim, right away you can identify it. If you do this over and over again, it almost becomes second nature. You almost can do it in your sleep. What I'm looking for in this, and I'm not looking for a real pretty stunt pattern. What I'm looking for is to get a gauge on the tank shim, and I know, at least from the previous part of the day, that you can see the clouds coming in, by the way. What's happened is it's not the same as the 50, and it is running harder and braking more quickly on inside maneuvers. believe it or not, we got a whole flight. Anyway, I can send this down to George right away, let him evaluate the motor run. But you can pretty much see it's not exactly the same as the 50. It's braking harder on insides. We need to get the tank closer to the mounts before we can really do any more fine-tuning. The storm clouds are rolling in. I want to get one flight on this just to see if the pitch is even close. Now, these are the props that were pitched. Really, they were pitched for Super Tiger 60 RPM, so I'm guessing this is going to have an astronomical prop load. Maybe not appropriate for this setup. Now, to my surprise, this prop wasn't off by much. And because it's running at a lower RPM, this is really a very surprising setup. It's surprisingly strong and surprisingly quiet. I'm not going to abandon this whole idea of using a four-bladed prop. Now, the only motor I've ever seen that I've ever had, of all the motors I've had, was that one Super Tiger 60 that we used on the original Spitfires, a Big Jim Super Tiger 60, and it was the only one that was comfortable turning, because in essence a four-bladed prop is two propellers. Downside of any heavy prop like this is there's always some GP you have to trim out or try to get trimmed out of the plane, but this is the most surprising thing today is how well the motor is handling this extreme high prop load. This is really something unexpected. It's the whole thing I've always found is never discount anything. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if this motor, I know Bill Hummel and Glenn Keller are getting side exhaust engines. This might be one of the props you want to try on it. I'm very surprised because most motors that'll turn a real high RPM, and certainly this one will, when you try to get them to go down in RPM and grunt and groan, they either run real rough and ratty and tend to shut off, tend to be hard to needle. This one has certainly shown some real flexibility here. Now, what I would imagine this is if you really were looking to pull a very large or bigger than average or heavier than average plane, this prop certainly would be one of the, I don't know what you would even call it, stump pulling props. I know when we first did the Spitfire and we went back and forth with even the 5 blades, the 5 blades really load the engine up though. I mean, you're really pushing it then. From yesterday's session, what's real important now is I have all my props ready to change the pitch on. I've made a real accurate list. One of the things I want to do, I want to change the tank shim, try to even out that, and after playing that video back and forth, it's pretty obvious. Tank has to go closer to the mounts. I'll start by moving it 1/8 of an inch. And then obviously the thing is to get out to the field and try that one more time, see if we're accurate. The other thing I want to do, this is the GMA pipe that I made, the stinger that goes in the Spitfire. So what I want to do is I want to take the other GMA pipe that has a little bit different stinger size and it's got the option for pressure, and that'll give me the choice of next time we do get to the field going with pressure, no pressure. I can do a couple little tests that way too. But basically we came out of this with the Bill Lee prop. Even though the 4-blade did work okay, the Bill Lee prop certainly seems like it's going to be the better of all of the ones that we have pitched now, but it also gives us a real good gauge for where we want the load on the motor. The load on this motor has a lot more ability to turn big propellers than the 50, so we want to take full advantage of that if we possibly can. So next thing, I'll pull the powertrain out and shim the tank. Remember, on the 50, we had this tank as far up as we could get it off the mounts. Obviously, we're going to have to go back down to some different position. I was looking, only a slight hint. There's no leak at all back here anymore. Only a slight hint of oil, and that's from the spray and the prop wash that kicks it up onto the header. Not really concerned with that. And while I have it here, you can notice I've worn out this set of wheels, even from flying on grass. I want to put a set of larger wheels on. What's happening in the grass? I'm going to put 2 1/4s on because the grass is so rough at the field at this time of year. Just have to make the compromise so we don't lose the landing gear. Anyway, while I have it out, always a good idea to flush out the filter, get the tank shim in the way I want it, try to get the props pitched, and maybe even this afternoon get up to the field. Okay, we have the tank shimmed. I have some larger 2 1/4-inch wheels to cope with the grass. And I hope I'm going to be able to finalize this shim now. The reason for that is then obviously when I go to retrofit the Spitfire with the other motor, I can kind of get a real ballpark reading. These planes should not be that much different. Getting them close, so at least the first day of flying will be meaningful. It'll be a big step. Now let's see what the weather looks like up the field. Now you would think we don't have enough things here at the Circle Burner field to be distracting. Terrible air, bumpy grass, dandelions. We have the newest thing, geese grease. As you walk out to the handle, you gotta watch for the geese grease. Go on, get out of here. Oh my God. Go! I guess they don't speak English. Oh, the Canadian geese, what do you expect? Now, the benefit of having a test pilot is I can fly the plane. I can also see the plane from outside the circle and listen to it. We've gotten from about, I don't know. We've gotten from what I thought it was flying a little bit on the slow side to here, this one. Now, we've been going in each flight on an EO. This is probably a little bit too far in. But the nice thing, it comes right back down to a 4-cycle, which I like. Doesn't stay in that lean run mode. It just stays lean in the maneuvers, even when it's set lean, in this case, on purpose. But we've got about a 1/4 of a turn, I would say, realistically, with the tank shimmed, and it looks like we could even shim it a little bit more. I could take one more little piece out of it between the tank and mount. It looks like the tank is going to wind up even closer than 1/8 of an inch to the mounts, which is real handy when building a plane. Leaves you more room for the header. That's one nice thing. The 242 brake was real good even with Mike flying a plane. But what I like is, as soon as you're done with the maneuver, right back down to level flight, right back down to where it should be. Anyway, we're going to spend some time today working on this. We got time, and we've already got the geese off the field. I feel like one of the little pieces of information we definitely can put in the bank now, because we've got quite a bit of flying on this with the tank shim the way it is if you're starting off with a Jet 60, probably going to be a good place to start is between 3/32 and 1/8 above the height of the mounts. And that's where this just about, we played with it here for a while, just about came into where it's breaking just about equal both ways. And that's a significant thing, because if that's not right, if you don't have it shimmed right, all the other trim you do is almost meaningless. Now, with the shim and the prop both in the ballpark, now we can get on to some, what I call the more fine-tuned things. Because once, for instance, if you're trimming a whole plane and you go changing the Venturi and you don't have the plane trimmed yet, well, kind of meaningless. Or if you're trying to dial a motor in but the prop is wrong, I think the first two things you need to get with any new motor is the prop and get a general ballpark tank shim so that it's breaking the same upright. And this motor does have a very clean, predictable, absolutely like a Tiger 60, very predictable brake. It's kind of like the best of all worlds, the brake of maybe like a Tiger 60, a Fox 35 that's very predictable, and the power output of the modern high output motors, any of the modern high output motors. Kind of the best of all worlds. We're already starting gallon 3 here. And so far we've been using the Power Master fuel. Mike's using it in his 60. With no problem at all. Excellent runs. Nice hard brake. And this is really an old motor. This is the 87 motor that's never been rebuilt. And Mike was a little nervous this morning. He's worried because the plane is really like 13 years old. And the controls really are starting to wear out. I mean, there's just some things you just can't help but wear out. And so long, but Mike's basically learning the pattern on this ship, which is, considering how squirrely the air is here today, it's a big advantage. But we've had good luck with the Power Master, had good luck with the 60 jet, and in the 50, I would highly recommend this as a substitute if you're not using Carpenter fuel anymore. We're up in the 70s, I'm telling you. It's a strange weather we've had this last week. Extremely strange weather. I haven't even bothered been packing a motor because I've been changing so many things, but sooner or later, we'll try to get a ballpark reading. So far, GMA 60, what a jewel.
do is get one more flight with the engine set a little leaner this time, just so George can look at this and make some evaluation. This is basically exactly the way you get the motor from George. No changes at all.
Yeah, I'm real happy with the way this small session worked out, but unfortunately, like all other things, it's time to go to work. We have gardens to plant, landing gear to make. And I think so far, we have a really great ballpark setup that was less than 3 gallons in the making. I mean, even if we had to go to a serious contest right now, this is about as ballpark as I've ever seen anything, right from George. No tricky parts, no nothing.
True story. This is absolutely true. You may think I'm kidding. We've always had frogs in the pond, but 2 or 3 nights ago, I'm out here at night scooping all these things fall from the tree above, scooping them out, and this big giant frog is in the pond swimming around. So I call Karen out, and of course, what's the next thing? There's no frog. You can't find the frog. So she thinks I'm hallucinating and everything. So anyway, what happens? Come on, fish. Come on, let's go. No time for this. Gotta go make rain. What happens, the next night we come back from food shopping, and we sneak out by the pond to see the frog. No frog again. So I'm looking all over. Now it's dark, and I see the pond. The frog has been sucked into the filter where the screen is, and he's on. So anyway, I shut the pumps off, and I pull the frog out. Now this is the same frog that ate the bird a year ago. He's completely looks like he's got run over by a truck. He's laying here. So what I do, I lay him on a rock, and I pour a little water on him, try to revive him. He doesn't revive at all. So I go about my business, scooping, cleaning out the stuff. 5 minutes later, I walk back, he isn't there. There's just a wet spot on the rock. So that frog is still around. Come on, guys. Come on. Come on, boys. True story. Not kidding around, dude. Fussy fish. Come on. Here we go. Here we go. Anyway, I got a million things to do. Rich Jack-a-bone's coming over with his cardinal tonight, so I want to get ready. Make sure my fish aren't hungry. Make sure my frogs aren't caught in a pump. Now I got to check the pumps every day. Come on, guys. I don't know if you can see the big catfish. We didn't see him for a while. All of a sudden, he's back. Come on. Come on, you guys. There we go. Come on. Anyway, that's absolutely a true story. We're going to find that frog. That's true. Where is that frog?
This is what I love. Good service from George Aldrich. I just ordered these. This is the all-new prop. Notice the different weave. They've got one layer of weave. The rest is unidirectional, highly undercambered. Now the first one I got from George was perfectly balanced. Just didn't even have to balance it. I'd be willing to bet this one's pretty good too. These are really finished well. Look at this. This is the highest level of molding. Believe me, this is really nice work. Anyway, if we get to fly this weekend or the next time, obviously this will go right on the Jet 60. Now this is as delivered from George. Oh, I have to tell you, I have gotten some props from various sources that were embarrassing how out of balance they were. This is a real piece of work. Again, this is very similar. It looks similar. I haven't checked the pitch yet, and obviously that's a variable thing, but it'll be interesting to see if this weave stiffens up the blades. Now remember, we had this interesting test of things that were, the BYNO responded well to the undercambering, and the original all unidirectional prop got a little limpier. So obviously there's more than one way to skin a cat, but now we have even a third choice. Now the next thing I want to do, the only thing I'm going to do on this, in fact I don't even have to, I was going to just polish this down. Don't even have to. This is ready to put on an airplane. Anyway, I have the other Cayman today. The other part of this equation. Oh boy, do I like this.
Another Jet 60. Oh, yes. This is the whole thing. And we'll be ready to put this guy. Now, this one is set up with no spigot venturi. This is set up the way I guess they come stock. The other one I have is a 280, a spigot. But now we'll have one each way, so we can do either. In fact, I'm going to have to reverse the needle valve. This is the way the 50 came. This is what I like about having an interchangeability. Now I can run the one with the spigot, the one with no spigot, and compare them back to back without having to take anybody's word for anything. Boy, these are nicely made. Every time I get something like this in the mail, I get excited about it. The thing I have to do, of course, I need to put the needle valve. Remember George insists he flies right and we fly wrong. Well, I need the needle valve on the other side. Not a big deal. You want to unthread this real carefully. This is kind of an idiot-proof thing to do. No spigot in the venturi. So we're going to start with the stock size, the size that this comes from George, get a little reading on how it is, and then as we want to do some fine-tuning later on, we can open it in small increments. It's 225. Now for a size, a no spigot size, that's really partially opened up already, which is good because I'm sure we're not going to wind up with a smaller one. A few things I do just to make it easier on myself. I take where the hole is, take my engraving tool and put a scratch or a dot there so that I can line it up. That needs to face forward in the venturi. Now I guess George has another way of doing it, but for me, a little scratch, a little dot here, anything, just to identify that that's facing in the right direction. Because if it's facing this way, I don't know that it would run worse, better, and maybe wouldn't run at all, but I know it's important that that faces forward on this type of motor. Is my method for marking it, that I have it facing, look at this, President Nixon calling. I believe this President Nixon just ordered a Jet 60. Anyway, as I'm talking and trying to videotape, one of the things I do, and it's just cheap insurance, I always put a piece of tubing on here, plug this off, and make sure you can blow through so that the fuel is flowing nice and freely. The normal setting, now this is another little thing, all these little detail things, and these are not things that keep the motor from being bad in any way, but I know this edge here, I like to dress it off just a little more than they do at the factory. These are just personal little preference things. I want to hook up the header, and obviously before we put this in a plane, we'll get a gallon or so of fuel run through it, half a gallon, depending on what kind of weather we have tomorrow. Get a feel for just how much load that prop is going to put on the engine. The setting I usually start at would be about 4 turns out, and then work your way in slowly. And I've been using high-rise 2-inch headers. Those are special order items that George has. That's a good place to start. So now we can compare the spigoted 280 to the 225 no spigot. We'll have, and we can actually switch motors back and forth. We can actually do a lot of stuff. Before I can mount this in a plane, I need to modify the mounts to fit the little clamp system that I use. Thunderbolt, 1.5 glow plug. Look at this. Boy, these Jet 60s are selling like autographed copies of President Nixon. What I've noticed is, on the one that we have that has the 280 spigot, our needle valve range is, I'm going to back this out a little bit, is roughly from the richest setting, and I reference that off with the cow line, just as a rough number, that I roughly have, and right about there I'm in a position where I'm bordering on going a little bit leaner than I want to run the motor. I always want to have that little hint of richness. So just as a original thought, what I want to see is if I'm going to have, roughly I'm guessing that equates to a 1/4 turn of needle
And boy, this is a really nice needle valve. It really is. You can tighten or loosen a cinch nut, but having a quarter of a turn is really, I mean, you can infinitely adjust it. You can just touch it like that and see the difference in the reading on a tack. So it's really a nice feature of the motor. Okay, now we're looking at, this is Strega Jet 50 so far. Probably have a Jet 60 in it before the week's out. Maybe it'll have my Jet 60 in it, I don't know. Anyway, it looks like he did a real nice job, Rich Jacobone. Carbon gear. Now, the only thing he didn't do yet, I got to get him his video on doing a canopy detail. That's one thing. Fillets look fine. What were you whining about the fillets not looking so good? They look fine. See, it looks terrible in silver. As soon as you paint this another color, it'll look perfect. You don't have any bubbles. No. But the truth, he has less bubbles than I have. Don't tell him that. No, you don't have any soft spots there. That's fine. Real nice, Rich. That's really nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, you got a little. Here's a little bubble right here. You could poke that. We'll give you a little demo on how to get rid of that later. Okay. All right. So what's the order of things? We ordered the pizza already. That's always job one. Order the pizza when we're going to do a night at Wendy's. All right. Big enough. Looks good. Yeah, it looks like it's probably going to be in this scale. It's, you know, it doesn't have to be scaled to anything. You can improvise that a little bit.
No, but what I mean is this going to be enough of a rubber?
Oh yeah. That'll definitely be fine.
And it works. I had the...
You got the linkage? Okay, we'll look at that.
Well, I don't know if I have the linkage with me.
First thing I want to do is weigh it. I want to see what this weighs, because you got to, from here on out, you got about 1.5 ounces for color too, and you got 4 ounces of paint still have to go on here. So let's number one, let's see what this weighs relative to, the other planes in the cellar. Doing is putting all the hardware that's going to go on here, put it on real carefully. Okay, that's the hinges, the canopy. You need a prop too.
Yeah.
Where's George's prop? You can put George's prop up here. Anyway, what we want to do is get a weight of where we are right now.
I don't have a prop.
All right. Figure 1 ounce for the prop. A prop is usually about 1 ounce, 1.5 ounces if it's a 2-blade.
What about these props here that you have here?
Yeah, just put Dennis's prop up there for now. Doesn't matter which one. You don't know what prop you're going to use.
GMA, add pitch.
Yeah, lay that up there. That's the prop you're probably going to start with. That one I didn't re-pitch yet. Okay, so now you know. Here's what you know so far. You're at 3 pounds. You're at 3 pounds and it's less than 10. Let's do it real accurate. You're at 3 pounds 10. It's 58.
58 ounces?
58, and you need 4 for paint. Realistically, it's going to be 4, 5 if you don't buff it out. You're going to be 62 ounces.
Okay, so I'm good.
You're going to be 62, 63 with the real pants, the carbon gear. That's well within. And you can also put a carbon backplate. That's 1/2 ounce if it needs it. It's going to be under 63 ounces no matter how you cut it. And that's excellent. That's for that size wing, you're lighter than my straight. Now, where Rich had the bubble, we took a number 11 brand new XL blade, made 1,000 little holes, hit it with thin CA and just pressed it down with the end of a Q-tip. Looks like the bubbles are well on their way to being gone. Now, the one thing you never want to do in a fillet is put that blue filler. You know what I'm talking about? That green filler?
Yeah.
Don't make a fillet out of that. What you want to do is just sand this by hand now a few times. You could use these rubber things. Which one is the right size here? Which size his fillet is, but these polywogs or everything. Here's one that's probably the right one. So you could take this one home with you. You want to get some 600 paper, you can work that. Put that in your pocket. That'll be a good thing for you to have. You could work the fillets a little more. Actually, next time I see you, we'll paint it. It's ready. You can fool with it. Actually, you could paint it. You got to do the cockpit.
Yeah, I will do the cockpit.
If it was up to me, I like putting the cockpit in before you paint it silver, but that doesn't mean you can't do it this way. This is fine. You're gonna be under 65 ounces with the tip rate and everything. That's gonna be just perfect. You'll be 1 ounce lighter than my Strega.
I was gonna put a pilot in there, but my pilot weighs a half an ounce.
Throw them out.
So he's
Make a Gene pilot. Just cut it in half. So once you get the dials or whatever you're going to put in here, you got to trace around it, which you already did, and dig a little ditch.
Right.
You know about that.
A little trough.
But don't go all the way through.
No.
And then mix some epoxy, 500 epoxy. I mean, make sure it's clean inside and everything. And just hold it on for 5 minutes. That's the best way.
Just hold it like this? Just hold it
and
with your hand?
Yeah, put rubber gloves on or something so you don't get a...
Just like that.
For 5 minutes and just... And look, make sure it's on straight, make sure it isn't...
Okay, there's no special other way to do it?
No trick to it. A little notch is fine. That'll work fine.
What do you mean a little notch?
A little notch. See, if you just glue it on top, it doesn't get much of a tooth. You make a little ditch in there. Make a little ditch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
You saw the Spitfire.
Yeah. You make a little...
Yeah, a little trough.
Right, and then it stays there.
Right.
Doing it.
The Mike's ballerina. Mike Costello's ballerina, too.
Okay, but there's no other special way.
No, not that I know of. Well, let's see this paint job you got laid out.
Okay.
People from coast to coast have been calling me asking, how's Rich going to paint this? He did the Windy method. He made up paper dolls. Everybody laughs when they see the dolls. Then when I see them doing it without dolls, forget about it. Okay.
This is not the size.
Right. So obviously the first thing, you go buy some colored paper.
Right.
So this gives you an idea what you... Did you do this with a sketch pad?
I did with a sketch pad, but I'm not an artist, and it didn't look too good.
All right. So you lay that on, then you use 1/8-inch tape around there.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And then on top of that,
so blue is going to be the first color you're going to put on.
Right.
Okay. Then you got to put whatever the second color is.
Second color is white. Or is it?
Okay, then the white stripe is next. Then you're going to make the rest yellow?
And then...
All right, and that's going to be a yellow piece in there.
It's going to be yellow.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're going to start and just go right over the end.
And behind that,
okay,
there's a blue stripe. That's it. That's the layout.
It's not difficult to do. There's pizza. Let's eat let's go upstairs and eat. Go out through the back, yeah. Go out through the back. Essence of Model Aviation. Look at this. A Boeing cup from Joe Adamusco. This is the project he's working on. Look at this. I'm telling you, we got all quality. Look at this. Is this the essence of Model Aviation? Pizza, jet motors, Brodak dope, and a free coupon for another. Look at this, you get another one free. Yeah, you get another one. 2 coupons, wow. You can go in the pizza business. That is good. It's making me hungry just thinking about it. I was just critiquing Rich's cowl. Let's see what the airflow... probably going to overheat right away on the ground. And how the carbon gear, the little thing laid down so that the pipe goes right through the middle. And he's got the little hatches here so it's removable. I'd say all in all, a cheerio job. Cheerio, boy. Hey, that pizza was good, Rich.
Good, I'm glad.
Plane's coming out nice, we'll get things.
Brodak primer, back to our landing gear legs. The Brodak primer is dried up extremely well. Now, I found a couple of things with sanding Brodak primer. It doesn't really like to be sanded with any material that I've found other than M600. If you find some better material for sanding, it's difficult to sand it dry, but boy, when it's like for doing fiberglass, you can see in one coat it's filled in most of the little pinholes. And in our case, if we need a second coat, we're just going to put a second coat on here. Of course, I really do want to have a nice finished look on this. These parts really do take a beating up at our club field. Hey, I'm glad we're starting to get some flying time. The weather was terrible. I guess you can see on the last couple of flights, the plane's wandering and coming back at you all over the place, but at least we're getting some time on the plane. We have the 2 jets now ready. In fact, I may get that other engine broken in today. Since it's supposed to rain all day, it'll be a good day to go up the field, and if it isn't pouring, break in that engine. Always want to have the engines running. Everything's pretty well set before I put them in a plane. Always a good way to do it. Finish when it's sanded with 1200. Boy, it's just perfect. Really nice. You can see it fills in all the little imperfections and scratches. And of course, if like here, there's a spot we may need, I can just sand this down and put another coat of primer on it. It won't matter at all. Little rubber blocks make a great little tool for getting in all the corners and edges. And of course, what we're really looking to do is bring out highlight all the details in these. Otherwise, it wouldn't pay just to make balsa wood doors or plywood doors. Little details and these little things are so handy. You can see how quickly that brings up the details. Now, as soon as you wear one corner of it out, you just move the paper up just a little bit. Hey, it's good to see Rich Jacobone getting his plane all squared away. Should be flying that soon. We're going to give Joe Adamusco's plane another try this Saturday, but prediction is for rain, so believe me, this time of year, you're lucky whatever you get. Even though we get a couple of flights in between the clouds here, we really aren't into the real flying season yet for another couple of weeks.
These are ready for I'm trying to decide if I need to put another coat of primer on. Well, I think they're ready for the white. Anyway, even if we needed to fill in more, we could just put another coat of primer, then we can go right to a coat of white Rodak dope, a coat of clear with a little bit of retarder in it, and these will be ready to mount up.
Now after a couple of, I guess we have about 2 coats of clear on here. I like the way the detailing came out. What I want to do now, I let this dry for a day. I want to take some 1200 paper and just touch it, since I don't have a whole lot of paint on here, and then take a little Gorms and buff it out, put a little bit more of a shine. I think they're pretty good shine on it right now. Then I want to assemble this up, get a set of wheels ready, get the gear. Actually, we're closing in on having on another tape that we're making. We're doing all the work on the development of the motor. We'll have that package ready to put in. We'll be ready to fly the plane by this weekend, I hope. Again, this is really just to get the dust out more than anything else, and there really isn't even a lot of dust in this. One thing we found out with the Brodak Clear, when you're going to put the last coat on, if you put a little dose of retarder in there, even if you don't need the retarder, if you're willing to wait the extra day or two for it to harden up, you can really get a nice gloss that almost borders on being not necessary to buff out. Now, in this case, it's not a big deal to buff out through the landing gear, but say if you were doing a touch-up area or like a big repair like Strega, that last coat of clear, by that time you've got everything well sealed. Hey, it's not a big deal. Put in about 10 or 15%, up to 20 I would say is probably reasonable of retarder. Wait the extra little time. The dry time, instead of being 20 minutes or so, will then be maybe a whole day. But at the end of the day, it will really be nice and shiny. Now, one of the questions I got on the email from many people is, once I put the clear on a plane, how long do I have to wait to buff it out? Remember, with other systems, it's 6 to 8 weeks, or it's forever, and by then you kind of lost interest in the plane. Well, this is not old dope. This is probably 2 or 3 days old. Well, it doesn't matter exactly, because I've buffed out props. Those small parts, I've buffed them out the same day even. The thing is, it is a good idea to wait 3 to 5 days, a couple of days anyway. It'll just make it a little bit easier. And nothing that, believe me, this is one thing, I have looked all my life for the magic buffing material, and nothing beats Gorms that I've ever found.
A lot of pretenders to the crown, but there's only one Gorham's. And by the way, we just got another supply of it from an A&P that was going out of business here. Steve DeJulia gave me a nice big supply a while back, so we're in pretty good shape to keep that part of our hobby alive and well. Now, the last thing I like to do is put a little final shine on this, and then we're ready to assemble. You can see that comes right up. Boy, it doesn't take long. And that's the magic of Brodak dope, is being able to buff it right away. A very short time window after putting it on. Now, it wasn't only a couple of days ago. This was just roughed up raw material. And here we are, buffed, ready to put the wheels on. And because I'm going to put this on a plane right away, the final shine gives it a little bit of a protective finish, but remember, that's another part of this whole thing, no silicone or wax. Try not to wax it with traditional waxes, because then you seal in the dope and it doesn't get the gas out, and it's not a good thing. If you can wait, hey, but in the meantime, you can put the final shine on. It gives it a little bit of a protective coating, but yet it isn't wax. There's no wax and no silicone in that material. Yeah, we're pretty well ready to get some wheels going here. Yeah, that's real nice. Again, that's the whole beauty of making a mold. 2-3 years later, you can mold up a set. And the Brodak dope makes the finishing part easy. Every part of this has gotten easier and easier as time has gone by. In the same time window, of course, I was painting these spinners. I want to see, now these are not even touched with sandpaper, Gorham's, nothing. This is just a little bit of Brodak retarder and the last coat of clear, a coat of yellow and a coat of clear. Whenever you paint aluminum, a couple of things is get it good and scuffed up, and keep the paint as thin as possible. Don't try to build up 8, 10, 20 coats of clear, because what happens, then it tends to peel off. Even with a small, thin film like this, it'll tend to peel off. And of course, with an aero spinner, you want to keep this ridge paint free. And we're going to use carbon backplate, unless for some ungodly reason we need a lot of nose weight. I have one spinner for a 2-blade, one for a 3-blade. We've been working with 3 blades, but obviously like to have both of them working. This is a key part of painting up one of these spinners. Don't get paint in that groove, because that's where it tends to peel, and then it'll peel back over the nose cone. We're actually closing in on having all the little bits and pieces ready for some kind of a final assembly soon. Anyway, you just look at the quality of the Brodak dope finish right out of the spray. There's no... You could go and fly a plane with that finish on it just the way it is. Now we're at the end of this tape, and then on the next tape we're going to try to fit this together. We got some nice flying weather, it looks like, in the next week or so. Again, the final vertical CG will be adjusted by the weight of the wheels, and we can put heavier or lighter wheels. But it really was nice that years ago we made the mold, and now we can just make copies of this anytime we want. Hey, and thanks for joining us. Please pass the tapes around, pass the information. We can't wait to get some more tuning on that GMA 60. We got some new props to test. It's going to be a great week coming up. And we're going to try to get this guy in the air real soon. Boy, that Brodak dope. Is there anything nicer than Brodak dope? I don't know. I heard a rumor that the first production run of Cardinal kits is already sold out, and they're making a second production run. That's great. Whole lot of stuff coming up. Whole lot of Spitfire. Gotta set this guy up. Very soon we'll be able to take all 3 of these out on the deck and take a group photo.
something. Everybody everywhere, you'll hear you sing.